episode number 87, Mastering Modern Selling.
Jeez.
Feeling old.
I know, 87, man. It's getting up there.
Yeah,
We're going to be in that. We're going to pass that century mark soon.
We're getting there. We got Daniel Disney for episode 100 too.
Oh, is that all booked?
Yeah, booked and ready to go.
All right. Brandon, welcome.
Thank you.
Brandon, my co-host, Carson, working again, planning, doing sales stuff. Man, we're going to have to change that. But we have another great guest here, Vince Menzione. Vince, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Brandon, great to see you again, my friend.
Good to see
my
you
podcast.
too.
I think you were episode 215 for me. So we're up there. We're up in
the. Oh, man. All right. Well, we got some work to do then. We got some work to do. All right. Well, I know we're going to try and we're going to cover a lot in a short period of time. So let's jump right into this. Vince, we're going to talk about partnerships today and the role of partnerships in modern selling. Take us through a little bit of your background a little bit, and then we'll dive in with some hopefully insightful questions.
Yeah. So I've described my career as 4 successful business transformations. I started out carrying a bag, Tom. So back in the early days of wireless computing before Wi-Fi, helped a company grow from 6 million to 125 million, go public on the Toronto Exchange. I was the top seller in the company, built an influence strategy and did events and what I would call modern selling today. And also built a partnership strategy, but I was a direct seller and then leader of the organization, moved up to CPP. I then followed a leader to do a turnaround. That company was trying to break into a new market, government. And I knew that I needed an influence strategy to go into the government, or we were fighting the 800-pound gorilla. That organization was, eight times our size. I went to Washington, D.C. I got a GSA schedule. I figured out a channel strategy in the day, like resellers. I also realized that selling to the government took a long time, but there were people that had a quicker path to the decision process, like hiring people that were colonels and generals and things like that. So we built an entire influence strategy and a partnership strategy, grew the business exponentially, and we were spun out by Golden Gate Capital in this turnaround. Golden Gate sold us 26 months later based on the back of the work that I did in the business for 5x their total investment, 10x their cash investment. Microsoft recruited me. They don't usually recruit people the way they did, but they actually hired a recruiter, and they brought me into the organization to lead the public sector partner business, coming on the heels of that government experience. And so I ran what was a $4.6 billion business within Microsoft. I did that same job for 9 years. I developed incredible relationships up and down the organization. And then when they blew up my business and they reorged and they wanted me to come to Seattle, I just moved to Jupiter, Florida. And my wife said, hell no, you're not going. And so I left and I started this podcast, The Ultimate Guide to Partnering, because I realized that organizations struggled working with the tech giant. Even though Microsoft has the biggest partner ecosystem, channel, resellers, partners of all types, a lot of those organizations struggled. I also saw that Microsoft people struggled too, like getting their strategies right. So I started Ultimate Guide to Partnering. I went back inside for 2 years. I turned the podcast off at episode 60, went back in for 2 years into $1 billion company. And then I saw from their side how they struggled. I tried to fix it as best as I could. I got a Partner of the Year award status, but I left during COVID because I knew that I got as far as I could go, and I was bucking heads with this leadership team. And that's what I focus in on now. It's why I'm so passionate about partnering. And then I started back on the path with Ultimate Partner. I do the podcast. I host events. I do advisory work. And I'm actually building a community now of organizations that are trying to partner with the 3 hyperscalers, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. We'll talk a little bit more about that influence and what's happening in the world right now that I think, like I said earlier to you, I think there's a myopic view of selling, and we're not zooming out. We're not seeing the bigger picture of what's really going on in these organizations today.
Yeah. And Vince, sorry, Tom, I want to jump in. That was why I was so excited to have you on the show and talk about that. I mean, so often we talk about sales and it's cold calls, it's cold emails, it's cold outreach, it's build your pipeline. And you've got a very, very different perspective on it. And it's one that I think is just going to keep getting more and more important as I see this big shift to partnerships, especially as you say, with the big 3 tech companies and probably a dozen or so big tech companies that aren't part of the big 3, that most of these professional service organizations are going to, they're going to attach to at some point here to survive.
But Brandon, also, I'm listening, right? What has been the heart and soul of everything we talk about in modern selling? Building relationships, human relationships, not just, pitch slapping and smiling and
Yep.
dialing. Vince, what you're talking about is how do you build relationships and how do you build that ecosystem? But
That's right.
we've been talking predominantly between, quote unquote, vendor and prospect, or vendor and customer. You're adding another layer into that where you've got the company or the vendor or the seller, right? If you want to call it that, the seller, the buyer, and then all the other players, if you will, or stakeholders, influencers, or whatever, that are part of that ecosystem that ultimately are going to result in a sale. And Carson's talked a lot about this using LinkedIn, right? He's
Yeah.
talked about a LinkedIn strategy, but I think you're looking at it even a bit more holistically. And how do you build out that ecosystem?
Yeah, and you and I were talking a little bit earlier. Like I have the blue sheets from Miller Hyman still embedded in my brain, and I think about this whole influence strategy on what's really happening. What's the win for the customer? Where are they going in the process? And our good friend Jay McBain likes to talk about the seats at the table. There's more people at the table right now that are influencing the customer decision process. You need to make sure you're developing a strategy to touch all those bases, to influence all those decisions, and get to help the customer get to the right outcome. You might be the main in that. You might be a portion of that decision process. And when we back up, and this is where I want to come into the whole hyperscaler conversation, the role of, so when we first started this co-selling, I was actually at Microsoft. We started this co-selling thing. Partners are like, why do we need to co-sell with Microsoft? Like, you're selling Office and Azure and stuff, but we don't need you. We know the customer better than you do. Well, what's happened now over the last few years around the cloud is that Microsoft, Amazon, and Google have all gone in and said, hey, if you really want to take advantage of our cloud, you got to sign these big commitments. And of course, we're going to give you huge discounts to get there. So there are $1/3 trillion in these large cloud commitments amongst the three hyperscalers. Now, those are decisions that are being made at the board level. They're being made. I've heard the term the CEO is the new CIO. So remember, the CIO used to be the decision maker in tech. No longer. It's the board that's making these decisions. So you're now riding on the rails of one or more of those three big hyperscalers. Layer in AI to this conversation, and that's a whole nother, it changes the game. And now organizations are realizing that if they effectively partner, the customer, they've created mechanisms called marketplaces, where now I can effectively take advantage of that budget. So if you're selling to Boeing and you're selling security software, if you put it on the marketplace and the customer can buy it off of the marketplace, they don't need to create new budget. They can go right to the budget that they already have and decrement against it. So they're helping to meet their commitment. So this created a whole new avenue, an acre of diamonds for organizations to go after budgets that they didn't know existed before.
So do you predominantly coach the partner side of things or the buyer side of things, or both, or what's your sweet spot on all of this?
My sweet spot is helping those partners. There are about 500,000 partners just in the Microsoft ecosystem, but basically Google and Amazon are all after this same ecosystem of partners. And I bring the hyperscalers in the room through the podcast, through the events that I do, and through the learnings. We're actually effectively becoming an education company now at Ultimate Partner. We've got a community, we've got a podcast, we've got events. And so we're helping to educate the partners on how to be more effective. And in fact, Carson, who's unfortunately not on today, he's participated in some of this. He's helped us educate from the Microsoft side. He's been on panels where we've had some of the other experts, and he's represented the Microsoft voice, because as an effective modern seller, he understands the importance of bringing those partners into his customers, right? So,
yeah. And I think, Vince, I know when I was on your show and I kept accidentally using the word prospect, and you would correct me, but the motions are basically the same with what a lot of what we talk about with modern selling. It's focusing on that relationship. It's being consistent, and it's that swarm approach, as we like to talk about on the show. Carson talks about, because you said there's a lot more people at the table, and if the board is becoming the new CIO, and as you were saying, you've got lots of different decision makers in an organization that could tap into that pre-existing contract. It's really about going out. It's about building wide relationships fast but deep, and not just pounding the phones. Am I looking at that the
Oh,
right way?
absolutely. Like pounding the phones doesn't work anymore, right? We have security practices now, so we can't. We're blocking the cookies. People are not. I mean, when's the last time you took a phone call from a seller, right? Maybe you have more than I have, but I don't. And
Yeah.
it's all about people that I trust. And we saw this shift too, and I think a couple things happened, right? I talk about tectonic shifts. We saw this shift when COVID happened, right? COVID accelerated everything. Satya Nadella said 7 years of transformation in 7 months, right? But everything changed. Our lives changed. Education changed. Healthcare changed. The way we operate now, with doing Zoom calls and meetings like this, prevalent. And I could tap my phone 3 times, and the box shows up at the door at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So people got very used to this whole digital world of buying. They got used to making the decisions independent of a seller and not maybe having that face-to-face contact with sellers anymore. Like, when's the last time you walked into a Best Buy to buy an electronic device? I know it's been a long time for me, right? I'm just going to do it online. That same process has now happened in tech and in other industries, where I'm going to talk to the people that I trust, the people that are surrounding me. And some of those might be other vendors. They might be other partners that might be part of this entire like solution I'm trying to, like, because companies are coming at it and going, here's my vision for the future. And it might be 6 things that they're trying to pull together. So they're talking to 6 different vendors to cobble that all together today. And all those vendors have a point of view, right? And if you're not touching bases and building your influence strategy with each of those, I call them coaches, right? They each can be coaches for you too, in terms of understanding the buying behavior. The other thing that's happening too is the millennial generation has changed things too. And now they're the predominant buyer in the corporate world now. They want to get to end of job. 75% of them want to get to end of job without ever talking to somebody, right? So this is a generation that grew up in digital and maybe don't have the same level of skills that some of us older guys have, or don't think that way. So everything is changing from a buying behavior perspective as well.
Yeah. So, Vince, we had a lot of Microsoft partners that watch our show and are involved. For them to grow, for them to partner better with Microsoft or any partner with the big three, what are the key activities that they need to focus on?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a set of operating principles here. This is a loaded question, Brandon, right? So we're not going to go through all the operating principles or the dysfunctions, but I think a challenge, or what people don't do when they don't do it the right way, is they're not deliberate enough in their engagement with the tech giant. They look at the tech. They don't look at that they actually have to sell to the tech giant as part of their strategy to sell to the customer. And building that influence strategy within the tech giant is also important for success, because it's a flywheel. So you could build an effective co-selling. You're also fighting for the attention of these sellers like Carson, who I'm sure he's got hundreds and hundreds of partners that want to come work with him in his customer base in the tech for social impact space. So how do you get that attention? First of all, you show up and be successful. You tell your story often and early and often. You show the metrics on why I should work with you. And I do that with Microsoft as well as with the customer. Like, I need to build these allyships, and I need to have that so that they are also helping, bringing me along, bringing me in on opportunities, maybe white space opportunities, maybe opportunities where we're already engaged, and maybe we have some blockers. And that's where a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon can help, because they are having the C-suite conversations. So if you're getting blocked maybe in the business and you have somebody who can go above or can help influence your strategy, again, I go back to my blue sheet with all my buying influences, and I want to make sure I'm covering all my bases and I'm getting to all the buying influences here. Those partners Microsoft can help you do that. That's one of the effective things that they can do. But you got to build an influence strategy to co-sell with Microsoft, and you have to think of them as your biggest customer, and then you go from there.
Events if I am a partner, would I be well served to really make sure I'm really honing in on what my primary subject matter expertise is and how I can differentiate at myself and kind of the pieces of the puzzle? I would see, it sounds
Yeah.
like what I'm hearing you say is the idea of the general partner who can do anything and everything is probably not the wave of the future. And I
Yes.
really need to go in and be a key piece of the puzzle and know all the other pieces of the puzzle and work with those people in a good way where they say, okay, yeah, you're a good teammate potentially have in here. Is that
great point, Tom? You may be able to do everything. You could be a systems integrator with all these capabilities and skills, but you got to niche down. Right. And I like to talk about the shiny quarter in a bucket full of shiny quarters, because that's exactly what you are to a Carson or any other seller at one of the hyperscalers or any partnership strategy. So you got to niche down. What is the one thing that you do better, different? It might not be technology. It might be that your organization has relationships at the CFO level. I have a client who has great CFO advisory level relationships because they're the tax and audit for those organizations. And they can bring the tech giant in at a level where they're not normally having a conversation, one of the rooms of the house. So what is the one thing you do better or differently than the others? Then that's why I need the compelling reason why I need to work with you.
All right. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, yeah, no, I hear Carson and some of the other, as we've gotten to know a lot more Microsoft sellers. One of the things that they say is, come to me as a partner and help me reach club. I know that's a thing Carson says, right? Go ask any Microsoft seller and say, what do you need to reach club? And if you partner with them to reach club, then you're going to have a really good friend that's going to help you bring deals to you. And I know you've got your operating principles, but from that perspective, like, what's your advice to partners from that? How do I help you reach club perspective?
So for the partners on how to help the sellers reach club, I love the club piece. By the way, there's also a term called red jacket. So when you get to the very top, the very pinnacle, and I'm pretty sure Carson's been there, you get a red jacket. So that's like the top. That's the top of the steep heap. That's the 1% club. But for the partner side, we talk about the 7 things they need to think about. First of all, you need to get your own internal house in order, because you also have to change mindsets within your own organization. And a lot of times when you look at a CRO, and we won't just talk about systems integrators. I like to talk primarily about builders, organizations that have software, SaaS software, that are applying modern selling, but maybe they have a pedigree of a direct sales model, and how do they need to go do things differently? First of all, you got to get your own mindset in-house in order. You need to understand that partnerships is important, and it's got to be infused into the business, both internally, and you have to have trust. Because if you don't have trust, you're not going to have this fluid relationship with the partner. Like you're going to hold things back. You're not going to share. Your sellers are control freaks. They're not going to want to go sell with another person or rely on another person to help carry the water for them. You got to get all those things straight. And then when you move to the other side, it's things around brand and story. It's the conversation around what sets you apart, what makes you different. It's then building that successful flywheel by delivering a result, maybe in an account, and then continuing to build that. And let's say I was working with Carson in his territory, and I know he's in tech for social impact, but now I know that once I built that and I'm known within tech for social impact, I go to Carson and team, hey, can you help us? We also sell into healthcare, or we sell into education. Can you help me go across the business and help me get introduced into the other teams there? Because then that's all funnel building activity for your organization. So I built a little bit. I've landed. I put a flag in the ground. I'm now moving in. I'm putting another flag in the ground. I put another flag in the ground, and so on. And now I'm building an effective book of business, an effective funnel strategy across multiple, whether it's geography or vertical businesses with the tech giant. And those are some of the things you need to think about from a strategy perspective. There's a lot of tooling and tactics that go along with these things, but you got to do that. And then you also need to be listening intuitively to what's going on, because when you're working with these big organizations, the largest organizations in the world, they're going to change their strategy. They're going to change their approach. A year and a half ago, nobody was talking about AI. Right now, AI is the thing. So you might have been successful here for a while doing this one thing or doing this one thing effectively, and now I got to pivot my business if I want to stay current, relevant, and successful.
Vince, what's your thought? We talk a lot on this show about the importance of personal brand, building thought leadership, using podcasts, using content, all of that to really elevate yourself above the noise. Do you think that's a really good strategy as well for a partner? Brandon, we've talked to some partners that I don't know, there was some idea that I don't need to worry about that or whatever. Yeah. But it seems like what you're saying is I got to elevate above the noise if I'm going to be that shiny quarter.
Well, if it wasn't, I wouldn't be getting so many requests to be on my podcast from all these partners, right? They all want to elevate their brand. They all want to come on my podcast. We're very deliberate about who gets on. You know, I only have the top executives from the tech giants, the top award-winning partners within the tech industry on the podcast. But yeah, I think they effectively look. This strategy is not just direct selling. It's you want to build your brand with the tech giant. You want to build it with other partners, because it's not just you out there. It's not just you and Microsoft out there. It's you and Microsoft and a whole ecosystem of organizations. Yeah. And if you're selling into a market, and Carson's getting his name mentioned an awful lot for not being on this, but Carson's selling in the mid-market. The customer is not necessarily buying directly from a direct seller. They might be buying through a reseller. In fact, their best relationship might be with a CDW or an Insight or an SHI, that they're buying all their software. Maybe they're buying their Microsoft licenses or their Google Cloud licenses from. And so effectively building those relationships all the way down market, being known, every tactic and every strategy you talk about on this show applies to both partners as well as sellers selling into a client. Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems that we can whittle it all down for companies, whether they're in the partner ecosystem or not, of that just elevating reputation, standing out from the sea of sameness, and being known for something different. And it seems like in those partners with the big tech, it's even more important, because the sellers, like the Microsoft sellers, they've got so many partners coming at them with their hands out, going, give me leads, give me leads, give me leads. It seems like it's almost more important for them to have that niche, have that something that stands out. Am I hearing that correctly? Does it seem like it's even more important for them than just direct selling?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's also following the rules, right? Like, so right now you need to have a transactable offer in the marketplace, right? To get my attention. You need to put all of your assets in Microsoft's Partner Center, so I can look and see what you're doing, what your value proposition, where you've been successful. I can look at all your metrics. So again, you need to do all of those things effectively, Brandon, in order to be effective.
Yeah. So, hey, what do you think, Vince? You mentioned AI a second ago, and I have a couple questions related to that.
Yeah.
Do you see?
Of course you do.
Of course I do. Yes. We could do a show on this, I think. But do you see the importance? Do you see AI really starting to become an important thing in the enterprise?
Yes.
Versus a toy or a novelty, right? Which I think it's sort of been up to this point, or whatever. And then secondly, do you see AI, the use of AI, really impacting how the partner operates? And does it help make the partner more efficiency? Does it provide a better experience overall? I mean, I would think the AI and the ability to use that and be able to help manage this ecosystem concept could really be a big change for some of these players.
Yeah, I say we were in the early days, the same way we were in the early days of the internet back in the late 90s, early aughts, in that there may be a leaning in on an overhype. We went through an overhype moment, but absolutely, organizations are embedding AI into, ISVs are embedding AI into their technologies, right? It's no longer, if you don't have AI somewhere in your software, your SaaS stack, you're probably missing out, or you're probably thinking about doing it if you haven't done it already. Microsoft has done a very effective job here. Now, we could talk about how Microsoft partnered. Like, Microsoft didn't build OpenAI, right? But they partnered with Sam Altman 5 years ago.
Good point.
And it was a master play by Satya. And then what he also did even more, because Google was sitting on a bunch of assets all this time, just hadn't brought them to life. They were first to market. Microsoft said, Satya said, we're going to lean in hard. So last February, after the buzz was going on, they started infusing AI and OpenAI into everything. And they had the collaboration stack, which is like, that's the perfect place to do it, right? Because everything we live in Outlook, we live in all of these tools, calendaring and Teams and all these other technologies. They started layering it all into and they started calling everything Copilot. And of course, their stock went from like $200 to $400 a share, like almost overnight. And they're the highest valuation of any company in tech right now. So it says they're doing it right. Mm-hmm. They also, what started happening for Microsoft, at least the conversations I was having with a lot of executives, is that they were becoming relevant again. They were being brought into the C-suite again, who had been predominantly AWS at that point because of what they were doing with AI. And organizations they've been working with a lot of these top organizations to say, how do I effectively deploy this? How do I modernize my business processes? How do I think about the future and get the efficiencies and the effectiveness of AI into my business? Now, has it been overhyped in many respects? Yeah. Can open AI feel like a toy at times? But it's evolving too. In fact, they just announced OpenAI 4.0 for Omni this week. Not zero. Omni, and the tools are getting better and better. And
well, I think the Omni piece will be, when it all gets together, will be game changing. And talk about, I mean, think about from a partner perspective, just the whole thing with the voice and the multimodal. And I mean, those are things that we have, from a technology perspective, have never thought about the application and use case of that. Right.
It's crazy. It's
and
crazy
so,
good.
Wide open, I would think. Talk about green field for a partner opportunity. It seems that way to me, and a way to differentiate and again rise above the crowd.
Yeah. So I think it is getting infused. It tends to be over the word that everything gets overused the same way when we first started talking about the web and the internet, and then we had so I think you're going to see this. I think you saw a little bit of that peak, but I think you're going to start to see more adoption and infusion into mainstream. And as that happens, it's the technology adoption curve, right? We're gonna cross the chasm with AI, and then it's going to be infused in our lives in a bigger and bigger way over time.
So, and I'll have one last question, Brandon, and I'll shut up. But
no, you're good.
I'm so intrigued on some of this. And again, my background working with partners, right? Partners, their business model is predominantly services, right? So I'm trying to keep bodies moving, people off the bench, all of that. Do you see AI changing that a bit from a partner? So I'm not so service oriented, and I have other more higher margin forms of income over time that isn't just bodies.
Yeah, I think that you can productize a lot of what you do today. I would say two things. I would say that there's a lot of services work for those organizations just to deploy the technology today. So it's all new technology. Whether it's getting layered in, there's great opportunities. And by the way, the organizations like Microsoft they're paying a premium now because they want to accelerate that, right? So they're paying a premium to these organizations, these SIs, to do that. I've also seen SIs. I have one person on my podcast, Dexter Hardy, who was an SI, and he became a product company because he was able to take some of the technology that he developed or some of the tools that he had developed and make them available to other organizations. And he's become an ISV. He's effectively moved his business from being an SI to being an ISV. And you can buy his tools on the marketplace, by the way. He sells digitally. He helps these organizations go from AWS to Azure or to Kubernetes or all these other technology shifts. And he's automated the process. So to your point, if you're thinking creatively and innovatively, you can do things like that, Tom, now, especially with AI. It becomes a lot easier to do. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
And I would imagine those pivots help them niche, but also help them tell a much better story to the tech giant sellers who they need to go partner with and really be able to raise their hand and stand out.
Yeah. In a big way. I have one organization that I partner up with that's doing it in the legal profession. They've created a set of AI tools that they layer on top of legal software now, and they become a darling to Microsoft. Microsoft just promoted them to a higher level of global managed status, and they were a little company, but they created a new set of tools and capabilities that are moving the needle for them in a big way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess as we wrap up here our kind of rapid show here today, let me see if I can summarize a bit what I'm hearing you say, Vince, because I think there's some really, really key points here that all come together. If I'm a partner, or I'm a Microsoft partner in particular, because we're talking about that a lot today, the things I should be thinking about, maybe not in any particular order, but really make sure I understand what I bring to the table, my specialty, my niche, my USP, my unique proposition that I'm bringing into the thing. Really make sure I understand my ecosystem. like really understand the ecosystem and the party that I'm involved in, the players, the relationships, all of that, and then work to build that and put that in there.
Yes.
Elevate my personal brand, right? Then use that to elevate my personal brand. And then maybe a fourth thing would be just what we touched on is think in the future and say, how could I potentially optimize my business, build other higher margin models, do things that are just not just services? Is that kind of the playbook that I'm hearing you
I
say?
think it's certainly a good part of the playbook, right? I think
Okay.
there's a little bit more to it, but I do
Yeah, I
think that
know.
if we're going through the lens of that service provider, absolutely, that's the playbook for sure. Yep.
And there's a ton of devil in the details there, right?
That's right.
But to me, it seems like if I want to be that partner of the future, those are some of the key things I'm hearing you say you need to be thinking about if you're
Absolutely.
going to do that.
Yep. Good summary, Tom.
Awesome.
Vince, you have your community, you have an event. I know it's sold out, but then you have another event coming up in the fall. So why don't you take a few minutes and go ahead and
Thank
share with everybody some of those, and then let everybody know how they could connect with you.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So even though the event is sold out, it's a small room. You've been in the room, Brandon, so you know it's only seats like 45 people. We've got the fire code and the marshal's going to be coming out. I think if we go beyond that, we are going to digitally stream the event though. So we're going to have this dynamic group of leaders. I mean, I've got some really big thought leaders in the room, both Microsoft and executives from EY and Tackle.io and AvePoint, and a bunch of other organizations that have gotten it right and really have built really successful business models. We're going to live stream the entire day. We've got this really modern studio. It's got a $250,000 digital wall, and it's going to be a happening. So you can go on to ultimateguidetopartnering.com events section. You can sign up for the digital content. You can watch it all for free. And then we're building out this community, and we're using this as an impetus too. Like we're providing a lot of this content for free now because we want people to become members of our new community, Ultimate Partner Experience. Tom, this is where the answers to those questions for all the different types of partners are going to be held, because I've got a group of ambassadors that are expert in each of the areas, and they're coming into the room, and hopefully there's going to be some LinkedIn ambassadors at some point in this conversation. But some of these ambassadors are helping to drive the discourse and know how to effectively co-sell. So if you're a partner and you want to learn more, come join our community. It's going to be the place. It's the community I didn't see when I left Microsoft. Like I didn't see the one place where I can go to learn how to effectively partner and co-sell and work effectively with the tech giants like Microsoft. So come to Ultimate Part. It's called theultimatepartner.com or theultimateguidetopartnering.com. You could listen to our podcasts on that page. You can follow us along. We have a YouTube channel. We're on every podcast platform. We're on Apple and Spotify and all the other podcast players. We're one of the top ranked podcasts we've been ranked by Apple before in the top 250 in business tech. And we've been featured in Podcast Magazine and a few other places. So I'm really proud of the level of leaders that come to Ultimate Partner, the Ultimate Guide to Partnering. So I'd love to have people come join the event next week. It's Thursday. It's the 30th of May. It's going to start at 10 in the morning. It's going to run till about 5 o'clock. Again, an incredible amount of content. And then if you join our community, we're going to put all the content from the event. We're going to parse it out like we've done for our other events that we did. We'll put it there as well. And then we'll share more. We're going to have another big event like we did last year in Dallas in the fall. And I'll have more to share there. Maybe for the next time I come back on, we could talk about the details. But come next week. I'd love to have everybody join us.
It certainly sounds like what you're doing there is so needed right now based on everything that's coming together, all the changes and all of that. Having a place to go to be not only learning from you, but learning from others, and the collaboration, I think is very, very timely. Seems like it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think just from my perspective on that, you're talking about it being very timely. I want to emphasize that with people. I don't think a lot of these companies realize how quickly things are changing in front of them, and those partner relationships and really focusing that niche, that focus, the relationships they need to develop. I think it's up to this point. I think a lot of companies have been somewhat successful despite their effort. Yeah. Because it was a little haphazard from some of the conversations I have. And I think it's even more important now to really get that focused with what is our go-to-market specifically with the big tech partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, we're still having some economic headwinds, right? SaaS, a lot of SaaS companies are still struggling through this year. And we have an election. We have some uncertainty, two regional wars, an election this year. So being able to tap into that partner strategy and be more effective, like.
Yep. Well, thank you again, Vince. Great
Thank
insights. Brandon, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on episode 87 of Mastering Modern Selling. We really appreciate you. Wherever you're watching this podcast, there's the notes. You'll see links. We'd love, if you're finding value on the show, we'd really appreciate the reviews, the 5-star reviews, and help us there as well. So everybody, we'll see you next time. And we'll see you next time on Mastering Modern Selling. I almost said Carson's line. He's not even here.
I know.
We're giving him all kinds of plugs.
He's getting all kinds of airplay today.
That's right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.